everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2019 GMC Sierra 1500, we're going to be showing you how to install the Demco Premier Series above bed fifth wheel rail kit. But before we do that, let's take a minute, check this out and make sure it's going to be the right setup for you. So for those of you wanting to pull around a fifth wheel trailer, this is going to be a good option for you. It uses industry standard rails. And these are going to give you that attachment point you need to drop your fifth wheel hitch into place. And since these are industry standard, they're going to work with a ton of different fifth wheel hitches. Just about all the different manufacturers. So if you already have one, chances are pretty good. It'll be able to drop right in and pin it down. This particular kit is going to be specifically designed to work with the Sierra 1500. So that's convenient. If I was pulling a big heavy trailer around, I'd like to know that I had something made for my truck, right? Not some universal deal that kind of made work type of thing. All the different bed lengths, it's compatible with those, but never a bad idea to be on the safe side. Use our fit guide, enter in what you got there, and see what's available. But with that said, even though this will work with a bunch of different hitches, let's say if you're in the market for one, right? You don't actually have a hitch yet. And for those of you that have a short bed like we do, something you need to think about, whenever you set that hitch in there, you don't have a ton of space here at the front of the bed. And so if you're wanting to make, if you end up making tight turns or anything like that, what can happen is your trailer, especially if it's a camper, could make contact with the cab corners there and cause damage. And so to combat that, one thing that you almost have to do, especially with these real short beds, is get a sliding type hitch. All right, so Demco makes one actually. It's an awesome setup when it drops in and feels the need to, when you're making those turns and everything, it'll actually slide back, buying you some more clearance up here. That way you don't have any issues. B&W makes a really nice one, and several other manufacturers. They're all pretty good hitches, but it's almost a must if you have a short bed. That way you don't mess anything up. For those of you that really aren't too crazy about having rails inside of the bed, because they do take up a little bit of space and really noticeable. And if that bothers you, there is something that you can use to get rid of them, more or less, and that is what's called the B&W underbed gooseneck hitch. Okay, so the hitch would sit underneath the bed, and all you'll see up top here is a couple little safety chain openings and the gooseneck style opening, right? Just a small circle about that big. And you're probably thinking, well, I'm trying to tow fifth wheel, why are you talking about a gooseneck? Well, you could use that underbed hitch and then use the B&W Companion, which is a fifth wheel head that drops into that gooseneck opening and pin it down, and you can tow a fifth wheel that way. So if you're looking for a really clean look or even more versatility, because if you use that and get the Companion, you can tow fifth wheels and you still have a gooseneck hitch. That's always a good option. As a matter of fact, it was maybe about a month or so ago, I installed one on a similar year Chevy Silverado 1500. Went together really good, looks awesome, and worked out really well. Another popular thing to do when installing a rail kit like this is suspension enhancements, and we get a lot of people wondering about that. Will airbags work and things of that nature? And it's hard to cover everything across the board, but it's something you'll have to check with if you want a particular set of air springs. We're usually pretty good, at least on our website here, of letting you know if those will work or not. But worst case scenario, you can always check the instructions for that particular suspension enhancement and find out that way. But how this kit bolts up, you should be in pretty good shape across the board there. But be on the safe side, do a little digging and make sure everything will go together. And not to mention too, you can always use in-bed wiring, which gives you a 7-way. You can mount it up in the bed, plug your trailer right into that, and call it a day. That's kind of the right way to do things. But when it comes onto it, you know, not really a whole lot here. It's a rail kit, gives you that attachment point. And being that it's custom fit, the installation went pretty well. From my past experience with Demco and bed hitches, it's not really that they're difficult per se, but the instructions aren't written out all that great, at least in my opinion. Kind of hard to decipher what's going on. You got a lot of hardware to go through, and that's probably one of the more challenging parts. But on this truck, it wasn't too bad, better than some I've done in the past for sure, and hopefully you know, I can simplify things for you and get you going in the right direction and make it a little easier on you. So why don't we go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of our truck. And first thing that we can do is temporarily lower and remove the spare tire. Just gives us a lot more room to work under here. And then we're going to have this big heat shield that we can take off as well. And we're going to have 3 fasteners on each side of it holding it into place. So this is what they look like. So I took the ones out on the other side out already because it's the same. But these are, these will have a 13mm head. I'll drop this down and set it to the side for now. Now you can hop up in the bed of your truck, get everything cleared out of it. And if you happen to have a drop-in bed liner like we did, go ahead and get that removed. They usually just pop out of place because you're not able to install the rails on a drop-in bed liner. So what we'll do, once you have everything installed, we'll set the liner in, kind of cut around it, get it reinstalled. But if you happen to have a spray-in bed liner, you're in good shape. You can put the rails right on that. At this point, you want to make sure that your actual fifth wheel hitch is going to be assembled. And that's because this is, in a sense, more or less going to help dictate our rail placement, right? And make sure everything's dialed in to fit our hitch really well. So I got that done. And now we can get working on our rail placement in the truck bed. So what they want you to do now is actually take your rails and put your hitch in them and pin them down. Get everything in here and center it and in the position it needs to be in. But, and from my past experience, you know, it's pretty cumbersome to do. Big parts and everything and trying to move them around and get them dialed in perfectly. So what I like to do is at least use the measurements and the instructions to get us a reference for the rail that'll be here towards the back of the truck. Make sure to check your instructions. Sometimes, depending on your bed length, you know, if you got a short or long bed, whatever, the measurement can vary a little bit. But you're going to measure from the end of the actual truck bed, not the tailgate, up to the point where they tell you to. And what they tell you to do is make that mark or that measurement mark. That way it'll be centered in the attachment points up here. Okay, so your line would go through there. And that's kind of tricky to see and make sure it's spot on. And so what I do is I make that mark as a good reference. And so in theory, the dead center of that, right, you should have the same distance on each side of it. So in our case, this rail was 5 inches, so I split the difference to 2.5. And then I measured 2.5 inches back. That way, you don't have to worry about looking through these holes to line everything up. I just used this back edge here. You can see it a lot better and everything else like that, you know. And then I went, from there, I made sure that this is going to be centered. You know, you can push it to each side, measure from your wheel well or another reference point, and make sure that distance is the same on each side. At this point, what I've done, and you probably, depending on what hitch you got, probably need help from a friend or two. These are usually pretty heavy. But I took the hitch and put our rails in here, you know, close, set the hitch down into him, and then, you know, pinned the hitch into the rails and made sure, you know, this back rail was on that line that we made and everything, made sure it was square and whatnot, remeasured, and then I did the same thing for our front rail. You know, I just made sure that it was level for measuring, you know, from the bulkhead of our truck bed back on each side, make sure that measurement was the same and made sure it was centered as well. You can start to drill out the holes that will let bolts pass through our rails here. So we're going to be using this hole, and that's going to hold true for every corner of our rail, front and back. Not a bad idea to look underneath the bed, make sure you're not going to hit anything, drill into anything. So if you need to drill a real small pilot hole or something through there to look under there, by all means you can do that. But I've noticed with these, you know, since there's such a big gap there, you try to drill a pilot hole, a lot of times you'll end up being off. So I'm just going right to the size listed in the instructions. And we'll drill down through here. Since we have some bare metal exposed now from drilling that hole, I'm going to come back with a paint stick, or you can use spray paint or whatever you got, and just put a layer over that exposed metal to help prevent it from rusting out or getting any corrosion from happening. For letting that paint dry for a minute, you can take these spacers here, and these are the little bit thicker ones. These are going to slide underneath here to fill that void there in the corrugation. Sometimes you might have to kind of pry up a little bit to get it started. Line up the opening in it. With the hole that we drilled. Then you can take a 5/8 carriage bolt, drop it down into place, and then I'm going to repeat that same exact process for the 3 remaining ends. So once you got all 4 of the bolts and your in-bed rails there, you can move to your wheel wells. And all this is a little bit easier if you can take your wheels and tires off. I'm on a drive-on lift, and so it might be more trouble than what it's worth, and we'll just work around it. But for those of you at home, or if you're on a different style of lift or something, you know, you can pop these off. But that said, if your truck happens to have these wheel well liners, we need to either get them out completely, or sometimes if you get them loose enough, you can kind of work around them too. But regardless, there's just going to be several T15 style fasteners, just like this, for example, that run all the way around it. So we'll just work our way around and get them all removed. With everything out now, we can pull on our fender liner. And I'm just trying to more or less work it out of position here. Like I said, if you can get it down far enough without completely removing it, that can work. If not, we'll just pull the whole thing out. This one seems to be coming out fairly easy, so we'll probably just get it out of the way entirely. And once we have this one out, we're going to do the same exact thing on the other side of our truck. Underneath the truck, we have this wiring harness that runs along here, and it's just held in place with some plastic fasteners. And just to be on the safe side, I'm just going to pop them out because our brackets and everything is going to come through this area, and I don't want to accidentally smash our wiring or anything like that. So really it's just giving us a little more working room. At this point you can grab your side brackets, and these are side specific, so check the instructions. Ours happen to be labeled, so pretty straightforward. And the way these are going to work, on top here, these elongated holes, the bolts that we put in from inside of the bed and drop down, those are going to pass through there. So we'll just kind of work this in position. And at least get it close. Kind of just let it set in place, and we'll go underneath and start to secure some of the bolts to kind of pull us up in position. To make this easier to kind of keep in position, you can take one of the U-bolts, and on the passenger side, we're going to be using the holes here close to the back of the truck. When you go to do the driver's side, you'll use the holes in front of it, closer to the front. But I'm going to take this, kind of roughly lift it in position, take our U-bolt, slide it around the frame, and through the side plate. Like I said, that'll kind of just at least keep it up a little bit more for us. And then you could take one of the big flange nuts, all right? The big flange nuts, and then the hardware that we're going to be using whenever we go to put it together. I'm going to put some of this blue Loctite on the threads. And I'm going to get that started. And this big bolt, before I even bother with the front, push our U-bolt back through and go on to the outside of the truck and get that hardware started as well. Here's how the U-bolt comes through, and you take the appropriate size flange nuts, put some Loctite on those threads as well. I'm just going to get these started and tight. Back under the truck, that frontmost attachment point, I was able to get that nut started as well. And it's the same as the back one. You know, it's just a flange nut, put your Loctite on it, and get it going hand tight. What you want to do is make sure that the side plate is going to be pushed flat against our frame. So, you know, run that in place. And we want the brackets up top that kind of round up where the big bolts from our rails are going through. You want that to be tight up against the bottom of the bed. So what I'm looking for now is just really to make sure this is flat. And once you verified that, we'll go underneath here to draw everything up. We'll snug these bolts down using a 15/16 size socket. And we don't need to get too carried away here. We just want to make sure that, you know, they're tight, snug, whatever you want to call it. This back one's pretty easy to get to. The one in the front, it's a little bit tighter. So you probably won't be able to get a socket up there, but you can always use a open-end box wrench like this one here. We'll snug down the hardware on our U-bolt. You can use a 3/4 inch socket, and when you're snugging these down, you want to alternate, right? So you want about the same amount of threads coming out of the nut on the top and the bottom. That way it draws everything evenly. So you can hit this one for a second or two, this one for a second or two, so on and so forth. We need to drill a hole in the frame now, and so there's this pre-drilled hole in our bracket. We're going to use that as a guide to go through the frame. So I just took a little punch and marked the center of that hole. And this steel's pretty tough. So what I'm going to do, we have to open this up to the size in the instructions, and it has to be that size. You can't go a little under or over because it's a special kind of bolt that's going to go through there. But if you happen to have a step bit like this, where you know, you can kind of run it through until we achieve that final size, it makes it a lot easier drilling through the frame like this. Or even if you got regular bits, start small, kind of work your way up. So we'll go ahead and get that done. hole drilled out to the proper size, and then came back with some paint, put it on that bare metal, let it dry. Then you can take the fish wire that they give you. All right, take the coiled end of it, push it through that opening, and we're trying to get it to come out of this hole, or sometimes too it's almost easier. There's the same exact hole in the frame, just on the inside of the frame rail underneath the truck. Either one will work, and it looks like ours just went through that one on the inside, so we'll go under the truck and show you there. Here's where the fish wire came out through the frame. And we'll take the coiled end. You can take this bolt and thread it onto the pull wire. You can pull on the fish wire now until the bolt comes through, and then what I like to do is take a flathead screwdriver and just apply some side pressure to that bolt. That way it doesn't want to fall back in the frame. And unthread the pull wire. You don't want to, try not to damage it, because you'll have to do this for the other side too. Take your flange nut, Loctite. Get this as tight as we can by hand. And we'll come back with a 3/4 inch socket and snug it down. Once you got the other side plate on, just like we did the one over here, we can then come back and use that same sequence of tightening to actually torque the hardware down completely to the amount specified in the instructions. So once you have everything torqued down, you can reinstall your wheel well liners. If you did happen to remove those, those go in the same way that you took them out. You can put that heat shield back up, as well as a spare tire. If you are going to be doing in-bed wiring, I suggest leaving the spare tire off. That way, it's not in your way while you're doing that. And for those of you that have or had a drop-in bed liner like we did, you can get that cut. So the way that I found works best is to, take your fifth wheel hitch out and everything, put the bed liner in there, and I use the measurements that we took before, kind of get me in the ballpark and just feel for it, and you can make a cut. I like to use a multi-tool, use a Dremel tool or whatever you got, see where you're at, and just cut around the rails until you're happy with them. But with that done, that will finish up our look at and our installation of the Demco Premier Series above bed fifth wheel rail kit on our 2019 GMC Sierra 1500.